Welcome to Eyes Open. It's February 27th, 2020. And I've got Julie Rowe on the phone here, and we'd like to do a podcast recording. Julie, how are you today?
I'm doing great.
Great.
Thanks for asking. How are you, Eric?
Good. I'm really good. I'm just really thrilled because it's a beautiful sunny day. And
Right?
after a long winter of dark, overcast days,
I
it's a relief.
I know. Eric's in Idaho. I'm in Kansas. We have somewhat blue skies here today, and I'm just glad because we've had overcast for weeks and
Yeah,
weeks. So,
yeah.
yeah, it's really great.
Well,
So,
Julie, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining me and being willing to do this.
sure.
We've talked for a little while about doing this, and it's the time is finally here. This is not a religious show, but Eyes Open is about exposing darkness where we see it, especially where Julie sees it, and um, so that we can bring light and bring awareness and understanding to people, so that we can correct dark patterns and bring more light into this world. Um,
Right.
because so we'd like to go into a religious topic today, though, and expose some darkness there. Julie and I have both had some experiences in religious institutions where there have been some things that have been inappropriate that we think should be corrected. And so let's go into that. As many people know, I used to work at BYU Idaho, which is a school affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I worked there for 7 years as a teacher, an adjunct teacher in the history, science, and political science and geography department, and just had a really great experience there as far as teaching the students goes. And I was never very closely linked to the administration, the politics and stuff. I got to stay out of that, fortunately, but many of my friends and members of my people in my neighborhood and just other people in my department and stuff spoke up and told me some of their frustrations, and there's a theme and a pattern there that I think is worth revealing and exposing. None of these people would come forward like this. I don't mind doing this because I don't work there and don't have those connections anymore. But the reason they wouldn't do it is because there's a blooming culture of fear and being silenced within the organization. There's this idea that the school, the academic institution, is married to the church, and in the church, if you don't follow leaders, it looks really bad. You look like a heretic, you look like an apostate, and that same sort of attitude is carried over into the institution of BYU Idaho, where if an administrator makes a policy or something, even something as simple as how to use, Microsoft Outlook or something, that's the gospel truth. And if you don't act accordingly, there's this fear of, being a heretic and looking like apostate, like you are questioning authority. How dare you? Sort of attitude. It's really unhealthy. Ask anybody on campus, and most of them will recognize this impure behavior. So one way of thinking of this is just institutional policy becomes doctrine,
Right.
and it's
In every organization, right? Any corporation, they have their doctrines or their dogmas or their ideas, their cultures that they want passed down in their
yeah,
organization. And if you don't follow, you're out of a job or you're out of line
right.
with what they expect of you.
That's
My husband deals with this at his job too. So
right. So it's not just religion. It's not just BYU
right.
Idaho. It's more. Thanks for bringing that insight in.
Yeah.
And but it does have this tendency. I know many people who enjoy their job, but when it comes to the administrative side, they're silenced. Their values, their ideas, and creativity are just not welcome because it's a very top-down institution. You just do what your higher ups say. Put up, shut up, and then your life will be great. And it's really unfortunate because many of these people have really great ideas and they could definitely improve things, and that's all they want is just to make a better, make things run better and be as productive as possible and serve the students. But if those leaders don't approve it, it's heresy. And so it's just an unfortunate culture. And I was let go because of my association with you and these podcasts. It was I have a little bit of a bad taste. I'm in my mouth from how things went down. It's okay, but I just want to share briefly how that went. I was
Wait,
invited in.
wait,
Yeah.
is it okay, really, Eric? It's not okay. It is not okay what they did to you. Sorry, but I it's I don't think it's okay what they did to you.
Well, thank you. Let's go into this, and I guess we'll let your listeners make that decision. I was invited in after a couple of years of doing podcasts. They had been watching me for a while. Um, there was no opportunity to correct me where I had been wrong. They did call me in once, my department chair, just to say, "Hey, how are these podcasts going? Are you using the materials you discuss on podcasts in your class with your students?" I said, "No, I haven't found a way to tie in, corruption and darkness and latter day end time themes into mapping. It just hasn't been a good fit." Anyway, and that was the end of that discussion. A year and a half goes by, and then the very high up in the administration of BYU Idaho, I was invited in, and I was in a very politically correct, seemingly nice way, was told, Brother Smith, we would never want to make someone choose between their employment and their side hobbies and interests. And then there's like blah, 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 blah. And
And they
then,
had the HR guy sitting
yeah,
there
yeah,
in the meeting.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then they say, but we need to have
But we're
you
gonna make you
choose
choose.
between your profession and your hobby. And it was like, okay, well, I'm going to continue with podcasts. Thanks. It's been a good time working here. Because the reality was BYU Idaho was always a hobby for me. It wasn't my primary source of income. And so it was easy for me to walk away from that. Although I do need to say, in fairness, the academic institution, when it comes to teaching, students are very well taught. And there really are good educators there. And so from that angle, it's very good. But anyway, I do miss the students. I miss working with them. I just feel very sorry for the culture of the people who are very silenced, who cannot go forward for fear of losing their job. And the thing that makes me very uncomfortable is this is all done in the name of religion and in the name of God. And did I talk about the Hebrew word in this recording, Julie?
Not yet.
Can I go into that for a moment?
Yeah, I think that would be great. Give them a little background. Kind of the reason we wanted to start with this as we go into other topics, kind of where to give people an idea where we're going on this. Eric wanted to too, but I wanted to expose abuse energy. I wanted to help expose all kinds of abuse, including what I call spiritual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And Eric's experience at BYU Idaho, I think, fits in with spiritual abuse. My excommunication from the LDS Church was spiritual abuse. And I've got some other stories of things I've been through, related to spiritual abuse. And then go into talking about other kinds of abuse, because I want to be an advocate for all people on this planet who have been abused.
Yeah, well said. Thanks for that.
So yeah, let's talk about the Hebrew.
Just real quick, I heard years ago from a scholarly kind of person that if you look at the Hebrew word in one of the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not take the Lord thy God's name in vain. The word take, I looked that up in Hebrew, and it translates really well as the word carry, like if you're carrying pitchers of water or something, which changes the meaning of the commandment quite a bit. If you carry the name of God in vain, it's as if you should always carry God with you, on you, in your behavior, in your words, in your actions, in your thoughts. And if any of those things betray what you know and believe about God, then that's carrying his name in vain. And if we do things that carry his name in vain, or do things in the name of God or religion that he doesn't approve of, it's carrying his name in vain. And I've come to see that it's offensive to him. He doesn't like it. And so just for example, going back to BYU Idaho, when it becomes a case of facial hair, which is a policy, no facial hair on campus.
You can't So for people that don't know, at the BYU institutions, students and faculty the men must shave their faces. The student can't even go take a test if they have a 5 o'clock shadow.
Right, right. And
Stupid rule.
well, and I've been sent
Stupid rule.
when I was a student, I was sent home for, having a 5 o'clock shadow. Go shave and you can come back, which is so fine. Dumb. Okay, maybe stupid rule.
Is it fine?
Well, here's the thing. Any institution can come up with whatever policies they want. Okay? Right. But when you do it in the name of God and of religion, I'm starting to take some issue with that. And here's the thing, and when it becomes a matter of fear, like, oh no, if I have a 5 o'clock shadow, I could be dismissed or something, and by the way, I could look like I'm losing my faith in my church and become a heretic.
You're less spiritual, you're less righteous, you're less of a priesthood holder, you're not following God's ways or commandments because you have facial hair. I'm just going to say this. If it's good enough for God the Father and Jesus Christ to have a beard, it's good enough for my man.
Right.
Because he got called in his last semester, we were married, and he got called into BYU Provo honor code office because he went to take a test and some random person reported him.
Wait, who is this you're talking about?
My husband. Okay. Uh-huh. My husband. Yeah, way back in 1996. The last semester 97. The last semester we were at school, we were married, and somebody at the testing center reported him. He had shaved that morning, went to take a test at like 5 o'clock that night, and he's got dark hair, very, very dark hair. And somebody reported him, and they wanted him to come into the honor code office. And he asked them, if I don't do that, what then? And they said, we'll hold your records, and you can't register for the next class. He goes, well, I don't need to register for the next class. I'm graduating in April. Anyway, so you get it. You've been through it.
Well, and you get it. We're on the same page. So it's, I don't know, when you do these things in the name of God and religion, it's a problem. It reminds me a little bit of some other religions. Jihad, for example, when you murder, kill, have war in the name of God, that's carrying the name of God in vain. It's just, right. It's not God's will, and it's just unrighteous. So anyway.
Not okay.
Yeah. I guess, I'm done with that. I've heard of other things at BYU Idaho and other church schools where faculty members had some inappropriate conduct with, a student. And I heard of this recently.
And we're talking about sexual conduct.
Yeah, I heard of a specific case recently where a faculty member at BYU Idaho, there was some sexual conduct and mischievous conduct with drinking and stuff, apparently. And it was this girl student's last semester. Once it got to, administrative understanding, they let the student go. They dismissed her, so she couldn't graduate. And
last semester, right? Wasn't it her last semester of school?
If I understand the story right. And the faculty member was, stayed, of course, and kept his job. And it's just like things like that. It's like, what are we covering up? Okay, and what? In the name of protecting religion, maybe? So an action like that is doing something in the name of God, in the name of religion, right. And it's just, to me, it's disgusting. I can't think of a better word. It's disgusting.
I knew situations like that when I was in Provo way back. I went to BYU Provo from 91 to 96, and during those years I was assaulted, and went to my bishop and talked about that and confided, and nothing was done to this returned missionary that did this. Mm-hmm. And it happened to me a couple different times. That the main one, the guy stalked me and threatened my life several times over the course of 8 months, and you know what, nobody did a thing, including the cops. Mm-hmm. And I was left victimized and trying to make sense at the age of 20 years old. How had my church failed me and the school that was supposed to protect me? These people were supposed to protect me, and it was far from that. Also, I knew of lots of girls at BYU who had been assaulted or totally raped, right? That didn't come forward because they were afraid that they would get reprimanded by church authorities and they would not be able to finish their education, because maybe they put themselves in a situation. It was the whole blame the victim thing instead of actually holding the guy accountable. And one example was my freshman year. And some of the BYU football players, I used to see it with the athletes all the time in Provo. Uh, and one of their quarterbacks my sophomore year was partying and drinking every weekend, and that's against the honor code. And then he was having sex with girls, and then he was accused, and actually I know he was guilty of date raping a girl, and they still did not dismiss him because he was the star quarterback for the BYU football team.
Interesting.
And it was not until it became a big problem that enough people heard about it that then he just quietly left the school and went to another university. And so I have firsthand experience with this from a student standpoint at a very young age, and what I saw in Provo, Utah, and it just has never sat well with me.
Very interesting. I'm really sorry to
So
hear about those situations. It's really too bad. There was another, just an interesting side note. One of the policies at BYU Idaho was you can't have a shaved head. Part of that grooming policy. Okay, lo and behold, we get a new president who's a little, bald up top, and the policy just kind of slipped away. There was no announcement of this.
Because he shaves his head.
Right.
He's bald, so he shaves his head, so they changed the policy.
Right. So it's just, I don't know. There's just interesting decisions administrators make here and there. Julie, tell me more. Did you have other experiences at BYU when you were a student there, or?
I had a lot of experiences. A lot of them had to do with athletes, because I was pretty athletic. I didn't play college sports, but I was athletic, so I was attracted to a lot of athletic guys. So I would hear stories, and whether it was the soccer team, the volleyball team, whatever, and the double standards that I saw with certain students.
Yeah.
That were on scholarship. Here's one that I find interesting. BYU makes their students, if you're going to get into BYU, you have to take 4 years of seminary if you're an LDS student, if you want a chance at getting in at least to BYU Provo. But if you're a non-member student, you don't have to take any seminary. Mm-hmm. Right? So, okay, what's that policy? Right? And life circumstances change. I saw stuff related to scholarships, related to grants that were given by BYU, whether they were in state, from Utah or out of state, what their nationality was, all kinds of stuff that I saw. I saw certain kids get jobs. I had a good friend of mine my freshman year that was part Native American and Black with Caucasian, and she bragged to me because BYU called her in and offered her a nice job, making more money than anybody else on our floor could make because of her nationality. They wanted to make sure they had their representation of, the minority groups. And so I know people have had this stuff go on at other universities. It's just the standards. It's just that when people do it in the name of a religious school, then everything, like when I was at BYU, the culture there, everything is done in the name of Christ, right? So another big thing that I see is BYU just changed their honor code policy related to the gay issue. So now students can openly hug and kiss on campus and not get in trouble for it. Okay, so now there's all these people that are saying, well, if this is going on at BYU, then this is following church policy, then that means X, Y, and Z. And they've got all these ideas of what it means that BYU is now allowing this on campus, and that God must be looking upon this fondly now, and the church is finally catching up and things like this. So I'm not going to delineate on where I stand on all of that, that whole issue, but I'm just saying that's the most recent thing that's come up in the honor code, and people's interpretation of the honor code that is affecting the culture in BYU education system.
Julie, I know that you're a professional woman. You have a business, and where you take calls and help people with healing and so forth. And you've always been very careful when you talk about these things with me. You never mention names, but you have described some situations. So I know that patient confidentiality is a big thing with you. Um, have you had experiences where anyone you know has divulged any of the abuse,
Yes.
say spiritual abuse they've encountered?
Yes.
Anything
In
you could
fact,
share?
several times a week. So I'll do anywhere from 4 or 5 client sessions to sometimes 10 a day. What those are, anywhere from 20-minute, usually they're 40-minute sessions, sometimes up to 80-minute sessions, depending on what the client signs up for. It's like a counseling session. I help them release their negative emotions and trapped energies. And we talk through their traumas, whether it's their addictions, their childhood traumas of abuse or molestation, their rapes, their abortions, their marriage issues. There is nothing that I have not experienced with these clients, including several clients that have confided in me that they were raised with satanic ritual abuse. And 98% of my clients are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or they have once been a member of the church. Some of them have fallen out of the faith. So these are stories of generational patterns, because I help them heal from the generational patterns, generational abuse, and inherited things, as well as the stuff that they have gone through in their particular life. And I hear tragic stories every day, Eric. uh, 9 out of 10 of my clients, they have gone through some kind of abuse at least once in their life, usually at least one kind of sexual abuse or physical abuse.
Hmm.
And I don't know if I have really any cases where there has not been some form of spiritual abuse, whether that client recognizes it as such, because of the culture that is prevalent in our society related to religion. And there are strong cultural innuendos in the LDS faith, a lot of good things in the LDS church. But where we are in the world right now, we have been infiltrated with some false beliefs. And one of those things is that I feel strongly about is whatever happened to follow Christ instead of follow the prophet and the brethren and don't question anything,
Right.
right? um, and that's absolutely a false teaching and a false belief. Or the belief that if Joseph Smith was a prophet and the Book of Mormon's a prophet, then everything that's happened since then is true. Don't question it. Just do what they say.
Right. Right.
And
Exactly.
that's a culture that's been passed down for 4 and 5 generations now. And so there's a lot of fear. Uh, I would say the most common energy that comes up is fear energy for people. Fear of not being good enough. They call it fear of not being worthy. I hate the word worthy, right? What is that? Um, Fear of not living up to what their parents wanted or what they expected. Fear of not being obedient to whatever rule they were taught. Um, and so much fear energy. And when we have fear energy, that is a form of abuse. And then the dark side in spirit realm piles it on because they know how to manipulate and cause more fear energy. And then pretty soon you've got a people or an individual that are so full of fear that they can't move forward and progress in their life because they're stuck on these philosophies of men. And it really angers me because we are all sons and daughters of God. We have agency. We've been endowed with beautiful gifts, and we need to be free to express those gifts. And I am an example of what has happened in the church now with how they've excommunicated me. I was wrongfully excommunicated, but I got to tell you, I'm not anti-Mormon, but I am glad now. I am to a point where I'm glad I was excommunicated so that I can speak openly to the public about this without any fear of reprisal, without any fear of being judged and condemned wrongly by leaders that have no idea who I am or what I'm doing or why I'm doing it. And they have their own false beliefs that are laced within their traditions. And now I can speak to the world and not just the LDS church and hope that there are people on this planet that will recognize I'm a true messenger. And I'm not trying to throw mud at any institution. I'm just saying every church, every religion, every organization, every corporation on this planet is corrupt at some level because this is just where we are in the plan with where we are in the last days. I mean, if people have question of that, read their Bibles, go study Isaiah and Revelations, and you'll see that I'm speaking the truth.
Right.
So
Julie, a minute ago, you mentioned satanic ritual abuse with some of those you
yeah,
know and work with. Did you have the sense of who was conducting that abuse when you talked
yes,
to them?
yes, they tell me, most of them. I'd say 9 out of 10 of them have told me who it is. It's LDS men, usually. There have been several dozen women, grandmothers, aunts, sisters, mothers that have done the sexual abuse. In most of my cases with clients that have had sexual abuse, it's brothers, stepbrothers, stepfathers, fathers, uncles, grandfathers, great grandfathers, their family members, and then a lot of cases of stake presidency members, some high council members, and bishops, where they had one-on-one conversations with bishops or stake presidents. That's the sexual abuse. When it comes to spiritual abuse, it's all of those people and then some. It's church leaders all the way up to the 70s and the Quorum of the 12. I have clients who have been sexually abused by members of the 70 and mission presidents and temple presidents while they were in those positions. And I have some that have been abused by members of the 70s, and they have disclosed to me that they are part of crime families that they have been trying to expose. When they tried to speak up and expose what was going on in their family lines, they were just treated like a crazy person and shut down, or they've had to um, you know take precaution to separate themselves from those, because the institution is so powerful, and those crime families that are part of the cabal, even within the LDS Church, are so powerful that these individuals, find no recourse.
Well, that was my next question. Would it be fair to say and link these abusers that you've mentioned to cabal groups and
Yes,
secret societies and those sorts of
yes.
things?
Some of them are directly tied to the cabal. Others are their own secret organizations, and we're going to see more of that. There are a lot of breakoff groups that are starting now on their own. A lot of a lot of spiritual abuse that I see, where people think they're getting spiritual revelation and they're actually getting off track. This is where I see Chad Daybell's gone wrong in the last couple of years. I see some spiritual abuse there based on deceptions of false spirits that were talking to Chad, and he did a lot of good. I mean, I published my books through him, and we were good friends. But what I have learned has gone on in the last couple of years with Chad absolutely falls in line with what I see with other groups that I've seen. I did a podcast on the Julie Rowe show with you where we talked about some of these breakoff groups, and I called some of them out, and Chad's group was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I see a lot of abuse, and the history. Now, I make this claim in my near-death experience in my books and in my podcast that I can see past, present, and future, and I can, and I stand by that, Eric. You and I've had conversations about this extensively. Um, and abuse has been on this planet since the days of Adam and Eve, when Lucifer came to Cain and made a deal with him and basically said, "Hey, I'm going to give you all this power," and turned Cain into a shapeshifter and said, "I'm going to give you all these dark priesthoods, and this is what you have to do. You've got to have a homosexual relationship. You've got to molest some kids. You've got to rape some women. You've got to have an orgy, and you've got to kill somebody. And after you do all those things, then you'll get the highest priesthood that I've got to give you."
Right. It's
And
I
it's no
guess
different with the Satanists on the planet now.
even the light side has their ordinances and rituals and things they
Right.
do to ascend in a light way, and so it just seems to make sense that the dark side has
Right.
their own ways of advancing. And
Right.
yeah.
They have their blood oaths and their promises they make to each other, their pacts with the devil they make, and their contracts that they do. And I see it going on both sides of the veil. Some of them are doing it in spirit realm, and some are doing it when they get a body. And some of them in spirit realm agree to come to earth and work for the devil. Um, and the light side has theirs as well. Like you said, that's where the temples for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints come in. Those temples do have sacred ordinances, and I know those ordinances do help. I see people going into the light all the time, and I see missionaries from paradise going in and helping those in darker realms find their way through these light portals so that they can ascend into higher places. And so it's just the opposition, right, that we have on the planet. But I think people I don't think people understand the degree of darkness that we have going on this planet with human trafficking. And when we do go into the tribulations, it's going to be unspeakable. I mean, what's going to happen on this planet? And the media can call it doomsday all they want. I look at the tribulations as refiner's fire and an opportunity for us to get ready for the most glorious day that's ever been on this planet when Christ returns.
Yeah.
And so it's not the end of the world. It's just preparation, for better days to come. But physical abuse. I've got clients that have told me the most horrific stories. I've got close friends that have been physically abused. And I myself grew up with some spiritual and emotional and verbal abuse. Fortunately, I was not molested as a child. I had attempts made, not by my immediate family, but attempts made by extended family members and those in the community. And God, for whatever reason, spared me of that until I was about 12.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about some of that in the biography, that you wrote for me. But so I come up from a place of having experienced these things personally, and then also, I've got about 1,500 clients, and after you talk to 1,500 people, some of them 2 and 3 and 5 and 10 and 15 times, and you hear their stories, you hear a lot. Right? I've heard a lot. And it's some of the same people, some of the same patterns, some of the same family lines that have been perpetuating, this abuse.
Julie, what is your motivation? Let's wrap it up here. My phone's about to die,
Yeah.
But what is your motivation for coming forward with this message?
I want people that have been abused, and I really believe that I don't know if there's a single person on this planet now, Eric, that hasn't been abused at least once in some form or fashion. That's just where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want those that have been abused to hear me when I say I love you and my heart goes out to you. And those of you that are suffering in silence, I encourage you to come forward and speak up and take your power back. And for those of you that perpetrate, I want you to know that you are being watched, that God in his all-seeing eye is very much aware of what you are doing. And those especially that are harming physically in any way, spiritual and emotional abuse is terrible, and it escalates into physical and sexual abuse. And for those people that are perpetuating these lies and these behaviors and these abuses, it will catch up to you if it hasn't yet. God is forgiving, but you will have justice. We will see justice, and he will extend his arm of mercy. But I would encourage those who are perpetuating these behaviors, if you are in a family where this is going on and you're being silenced, to have the courage to speak up and break these negative patterns of abuse. It can be done. It's a lot of work. It can be done. And then to give hope to the victims, right? That you don't have to suffer forever. And just encourage you to come to Christ and let him heal you, because he will. He's healed me. He's still healing me. So.
That's beautifully said, Julie. I don't have anything else to add to that. That's a perfect way to end this. So thank you for your time and your boldness and courage for standing up against this darkness. Really appreciate it.
You too. Thank you.
And thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Sounds good. Thanks, Eric.